Hey guys, Spence here, and this is
MegaTagmension Blanc Neptune vs. Zombies.
So, this game. It was made and released by Idea Factory, Compile Heart, and Tamsoft, and was published by Idea Factory International. This isn't the game's first release, however. It was originally released back in October of 2015 on the PlayStation Vita in Japan, with the English release 1 year later in 2016 in May 10th, with the Steam release happening in October the same year. Now this game is more or less the spiritual successor to their other spin-off action game,
Hyperdimension Neptunia U. Action Unleashed.
as it shares all of the same features. Well, most features. 10-second review of that game, the plot is paper thin and poorly conceived, the characters aren't interesting in the slightest and don't do anything interesting in the slightest, and the combat is beyond repetitive. It is not worth your time. But I'm a man of second chances, so without further ado, let's see if they learned a lesson and see exactly what's going on in... I'm not saying this title. Now, for the uninitiated, don't worry, I'll make this quick. Basically, the Hyper Neptunia series is what happens when Mizuno Naoko attempts to personify the game industry as places, people, and things, and, well, Hyper Neptunia is what you get. In the world of game industry, there are different countries, and each one is represented by a goddess. These goddesses are referred to as CPUs, and they gain their power from the faith of their subjects in their respective kingdoms. And when I say CPU or goddess, I basically mean magical girls who can turn into more powerful magical girls, complete with siblings, except for Bird. I don't know why. They basically act as guardians of the world and basically fight off any threats and work together and interact, and that's largely what their games are. But that's not important. In today's adventure, the CPUs decide to enroll in an academy so they can become more familiar with humans. Why? I don't know. But to their dismay, the academy they're enrolled in is going to close down soon because of low birth rates and the enrollment being really low. The airhead, usual series protagonist, Neptune, hears about half of my last sentence and decides to make a movie that will hopefully increase the enrollment rate at the academy, making them not close down. And for self-centered hopes of stardom, Blanc gets involved. This movie obviously will include zombies, and very quickly, actual zombies show up on the scene, and it isn't long before all the other CPUs gets involved, along with characters in later games and characters from that previous game, Unleashed, such as Famitsu and Dengekiko, along with newcomer Tamsoft, not a real name, who I will refer to as Tammy to avoid confusion. The game's plot tries to be funny, charming, and aware, but really comes off aware to a fault, sorta charming, and really bloated. A lot of the jokes really fall flat and aren't particularly clever. The awareness doesn't really resonate with me. I mean, very early on, like in the first 3 minutes, they make their fourth wall joke, then the characters argue about making that joke. Admittedly, there are very few games that are like this that has a plot that's kind of aware that it's a game at the same time not, but it's being done with characters that personalities are basic anime tropes, and heck, let's be honest, you can tell their personalities just by looking at their portraits, which some people will argue is a good thing, but frankly doesn't add much to the actual conversations you're listening to, which adds to the bloated part of it. There is a lot of conversations in this game, and they drag on, and they just won't stop. And they're not thought-provoking either most of the time. Unless you really like hearing these characters interact, it's not the sort of game that you're gonna come for the plot. You're gonna come for the melodrama at best. Oh wait, the plot? Yeah, it doesn't really go anywhere also, so don't expect any updates on that zombie situation soon. Or that birth rate decline. Why would they reference a real life issue in Japan again? A reality check? Gameplay wise, you got another third person brawler action game in the same vein of Musou's. Loosely. When you're in combat, which is basically all the time if you're not in the menu or watching a conversation go, you'll be able to run, jump, dash, do a double jump, weak attack, strong attack, and depending on which bumper you hold down, you'll have access to different moves. Holding down the right bumper will give you access to your character's special moves. These moves are exclusive to that particular character. Meanwhile, holding down the left bumper and hitting the corresponding button will allow you to switch to your other character, because you select 2 in this, a lot like Samurai Warriors 4. 2, and the previous game Unleashed, along with giving you access to your super big special move and your Lily special, which is just another super big special move, and transformation, which gives you a large power boost, along with if you use it with your super big special move, the move will have a power boost, but you will lose the transformation afterward. Your goals and stages are simple. Kill all the enemies, or kill specific enemies, and that is it. After you complete a level, you'll be rated on how efficient you were, and then you'll be put back on the main lobby menu, where you can then go into shops, buy new items and weapons and upgrades for your characters, see what treasures you collected, which enemies drop, which you pick up automatically so you never have to worry about losing them, and if you complete a treasure set, you get extras like costumes. Yay! And lastly, accessories like masks and headbands. My Tammy has a cute baseball cap. When it comes to the gameplay, everything functions as intended. The only problem is everything else. For a game where you spend most of your time in combat, not counting those conversations, the enemies are really basic. The tactics that enemies incorporate never go past running at you and attacking you. Ranged and flying enemies are included in this. And even bosses, which frankly feel more like mid-bosses, basically worked under the same principle. The only real difference being that they have incredibly large life bars and don't flinch when you hit them. Now, saying enemies run at you to attack you might sound really dumb, but when I say that, I mean they don't do anything else. That means they don't try to jump, dodge, block, counter you, inflict status effects, heal themselves, or have any particularly interesting abilities like teleportation or the ability to spawn more enemies. So being stuck fighting enemies that have tactics that don't go past Leroy Jenkins really doesn't make for an engaging experience. And like I said earlier, your only objective in these missions are to kill all the enemies or kill certain enemies. The only real stages that change this up are the ones where you have to find the enemies on the map. And those are not fun because there's no indicator of where the enemies are, and if you're unlucky, you can find yourself wandering the entirety of these large barren levels trying to find them. Meanwhile, your character isn't particularly fast when it comes to moving across great distances. Speaking of your character, there's another issue where basically every character starts off at level 1 and have very limited combos and aren't very strong at the start. But as the game progresses in single player, you'll get access to more characters as you play, but they'll also start at level 1, meanwhile your other characters are going to be leveling up as they go along. Meaning that unless you decide to do some level backtracking, you won't be able to use them to their full potential and you'll be stuck with a handicap for a while. The gameplay itself is fun for the first 3 missions. After your third boss, you come to the sad realization that this is really about it. It's really the game's lack of scope that really bothers me. I'm not too sure if it's from a hardware limitation, I'm not too sure if it's due to a lack of budget, I'm not too sure if it has something to do with an approaching deadline. Maybe I'm being particularly picky because this was a Vita game, but that being said, it feels like there's a lot of wasted potential here. I mean, characters are capable of flying, but they don't do anything with it outside of like their big fancy special attacks. Then you have these big flashy attacks and you're using them on enemies that look really rudimentary and half the time are references that oddly enough make them look even less inspired. The game probably was just designed to be a small game on the Vita, which is kinda evident from how levels can be beaten within a few minutes and the hefty discount it got on its release on Steam. But that being said, the gameplay itself is best enjoyed in bursts, but it's so shallow and so basic that even other games like Samurai Kagura Shinobi Versus and Samurai Warriors 4 2 don't stoop to these lows of monotony. Presentation-wise, when it comes to the PC options, the only thing you can really do is change your resolutions and choose if you want full screen or windowed. Outside of that, it's just sound options, changing the voice acting from English to Japanese, messing with the sliders for the volume of music, sound effects, and voice acting, and being able to turn on and off individual character voices, which sounds more mean-spirited than a feature on the surface. But after hearing Tammy go, for the 50th time, I understood. Visually, it maintains the series' staple of being one of the most cutesy anime moe things out of Japan, delivering all the story bits through kinetic visual novel style, which is fine, but in the 3D plane, it's a lot of just flat battle arenas and uninspired enemies that are references to other things that make them look even less imaginative. The only non-negative or neutral thing I say about the presentation is that I really like the soundtrack. I'm a complete sucker for electric guitars and digital instruments. In short, the presentation functions. If you like the moe style, there's a lot of that, but as far as I'm concerned, that's kinda about it. So that's MegaTagmention Brand Awareness Be Damned Something Zombies. Would I recommend this game? No. The only way I would recommend this game is if you are a big Neptunia fan, have a heavy tolerance for below average games, and on the most hefty of discounts. Which, considering its current release sale price, you might want to jump on that. For everyone else, however, no, this is a below average, bare minimum to be fun sort of game. If I was reviewing this at the time of its release on the Vita, I'd be way more forgiving, because, you know, it's a handheld, but now in 2016, on a PC? No, this whole thing just doesn't work. The only thing I can say that it has going for it is its kinda charming nonsensical plot, but even that has problems with generic tropey characters that analog-y nature might have been good in previous games, well, definitely doesn't work now. Along with the bigger issues of unimaginative combat with unimaginative enemies and unimaginative stages. I did have some fun with it, like Tammy's fun to play, but anytime I stopped playing the game, later on I never felt inclined to go back to it. Mainly because I know what to expect. And in general, that's just what it is, a generic, uninspired action game that couldn't even surpass the previous game in any meaningful way. I barely recommend it for its current sale price right now, going at $17.99, and I definitely would never recommend it at its full price. Hello again, thanks for watching. If you happen to like this sort of content, drop a like, comment, subscribe, and maybe tell a friend to also be interested in this sort of content. In the meantime, if you want to hear me talk about more Vita ports on the PC and Steam, then I recommend clicking on the current annotations. The left one will take you to my video on God Eater 1 and 2. Then good games and are still packaged together. On the other hand, you can click on the right annotation to hear my opinion on Simmer and Kakura Shinobi Versus. Very similar to MegaTagmension, just replace the CPUs with ninjas and kick the fan service up to 11.